The universe stretched out in a tapestry of stars, a canvas of brilliance and shadow, where countless civilizations thrived, collided, and vanished into obscurity. Amid this cosmic dance, a peculiar transmission crackled across the channels of the Aegis Dawn, a sleek vessel cruising the boundaries of human-explored space. Captain Elliot Vance sat in the command chair, his rugged face illuminated by the soft glow of the holographic console. The message, repeating in an ancient dialect of the galactic concord, seemed more a whisper than a plea, but its origin was unmistakable. The Thelia. The Thelia were a mystery, even in a galaxy brimming with enigmas. They were beings of almost otherworldly tranquility, their translucent forms shimmering with hues that shifted with their emotions. Each Thelia seemed to carry a piece of their watery homeworld, Nihilus, within them, a place of glimmering oceans and ethereal reefs, untouched by the violence that scarred so many other worlds. They had long avoided galactic conflicts, their wisdom and pacifism earning them respect and a curious detachment from interstellar politics. For them to call for help was an anomaly, a ripple in their unyielding calm. Elliot leaned forward, his brow furrowed. His fingers traced the edges of the command console as he replayed the message. "Help us, desperation. We are not strong enough." The words were faint, interspersed with static, but the weight of them lingered in the room. The bridge crew exchanged glances, their unease palpable. At his side, Lieutenant Asha Patel, the ship's communications officer, adjusted her headset, her dark eyes scanning the flickering data feeds. "Captain, I've cleaned up the transmission as much as I can," she said, her voice steady but tinged with skepticism. "It's definitely Thelia in origin. They're broadcasting on a frequency they haven't used in decades. Whatever this is, it's urgent." Elliot rubbed his temples, his mind racing. The Thelia weren't allies, not in the traditional sense. Humanity's encounters with them had been minimal, their interactions polite but distant. They had no history of asking for aid, let alone from a species as volatile and war-scarred as humans. Yet something in the tone of the message, the raw vulnerability behind those clipped phrases, struck a chord in him. "We've just come out of a war, Captain," said Dmitry Volkov, the ship's grizzled chief engineer, leaning back in his chair with his usual air of blunt pragmatism. "Our resources are stretched thin, and let's face it, the Thelia have never lifted a finger to help anyone else. Why should we risk our necks now?" Elliot shot him a look, his voice low but firm. "Because no one else will." Dmitry shrugged, folding his arms across his chest. "And maybe there's a reason for that." The tension in the room thickened as the crew fell silent. Outside the viewports, the stars continued their indifferent vigil, their cold beauty contrasting the turmoil unfolding within the ship. Elliot stood and paced the length of the bridge, his boots echoing softly on the polished metal floor. He knew the risks, the questions of trust, the whispers of doubt, but he also knew the cost of inaction. "Asha," he said finally, turning to the communications officer. "What's the source of the transmission? How far are we?" Asha hesitated, her fingers dancing over the console before she answered. "It's originating from Nihilus. We're about 6 jumps out if we take the primary relay routes. Faster if we cut through uncharted space, but that's risky." "Risky seems to be our specialty," Elliot muttered, a faint smirk breaking his otherwise grim expression. He straightened, his decisions solidifying like steel in a forge. "Plot a course. Uncharted or not, we're going." The bridge crew exchanged uncertain glances, but none spoke against him. There was something in Elliot's presence, a quiet determination that seemed to pull them into his orbit. He wasn't the kind of man who made decisions lightly, and when he chose a path it was hard to argue. Still, the doubts lingered in the unspoken words between them. As Asha keyed in the coordinates, Dmitry leaned closer to the captain, lowering his voice. "Are you sure about this, Elliot? This feels like walking into a trap." Elliot's jaw tightened, his gaze fixed on the starfield ahead. "I'm not sure about anything, Dmitry. But I know this. If the Thelia are asking for help, something's wrong. And if it's bad enough to make them break their silence, it's something we can't ignore." The hum of the ship's engines shifted as the Aegis Dawn prepared for the jump. Lights flickered across the consoles, and the faint vibrations of the drive core resonated through the hull. Elliot returned to his chair, his hands gripping the armrests as he stared at the looming void. "Jump drive engaging in 3, 2, 1, Asha announced, her voice steady but carrying an undercurrent of tension. As the stars stretched and blurred into streaks of light, the bridge was momentarily bathed in an ethereal glow. Elliot's thoughts raced as the Aegis Dawn plunged into uncharted space. Questions swirled in his mind. What could drive the Thylia to seek human help? What dangers lay ahead? And, perhaps most hauntingly, would his crew pay a price they couldn't afford? The ship emerged from the jump, the blinding light giving way to a dark expanse dotted with the faint glimmers of distant systems. Ahead, the pale blue orb of Nihilus hung in the void, its serene beauty at odds with the foreboding sense that had settled over the crew. Elliot exhaled slowly, his gaze never leaving the planet. Whatever awaited them below, he knew one thing for certain. The galaxy's most peaceful species had called for help, and humanity was answering. The journey to Nihilus was uneventful, save for the eerie silence that filled the bridge of the Aegis Dawn. The usual camaraderie among the crew had been replaced by an undercurrent of unease, each member silently grappling with the unknown, awaiting them. When the ship emerged from its final jump, the sight of Nihilus silenced even the most skeptical among them. The planet was a masterpiece of natural beauty, a sphere of iridescent blues and greens, its oceans shimmering like liquid crystal under the pale light of its twin moons. Wisps of golden mist hovered over the surface, dancing in synchrony with the tides. From orbit, the sight was mesmerizing, a world untouched by the chaos that plagued so much of the galaxy. But as the Aegis Dawn descended into the atmosphere, the illusion of serenity began to fracture. What should have been a landscape of peaceful aquatic temples and thriving Thylia communities was instead a scene of quiet devastation. Gigantic crystalline structures, once radiant with the Thylia's emotional symphony of colors, lay in ruins. Fractured shards sparkled under the light of the setting sun, a cruel reminder of their former grandeur. Elliot stood at the viewport, his expression unreadable. Beside him, Asha whispered, "It's worse than I imagined. Looks like something ripped through here with precision," Dmitri muttered, squinting at the cracked spires. This wasn't a natural disaster. This was deliberate. The ship's sensors confirmed as much. Heat signatures and energy residues consistent with high-intensity attacks painted a grim picture. Elliot ordered the ship to land on one of the few intact platforms near a Thylia settlement. As the landing gears engaged, the crew prepared to meet a species they had only known through vague reports and second-hand accounts. When the hatch opened, the crew was greeted by a sight that was both beautiful and haunting. A group of Thylia emerged from the mist, their translucent bodies shimmering with faint hues of blue and green, colors of sorrow and anxiety. Their forms seemed almost fragile, with long, slender appendages that rippled like liquid as they moved. Their faces, if they could be called such, were smooth and featureless, save for two glowing orbs that pulsed faintly with each thought or word. The air around them was heavy, not with sound, but with the weight of emotions projected directly into the minds of the humans. "Humans," came a soft voice, not spoken but felt. It was the elder Thylia, Liraeum, whose presence radiated a pale silver hue, a sign of wisdom and age among their kind. "We thank you for coming, though we fear it may already be too late." Elliot stepped forward, his tone respectful but firm. "Elder Liraeum, we received your message. Tell us what's happening here. What's causing this destruction?" The Thylia's shimmering body dimmed slightly, a clear expression of grief. "They are called the Kariv," Liraeum began. "Predators not of flesh and blood, but of energy and thought. They consume not just our bodies, but the very essence of our minds. We are defenseless against them." A ripple of unease passed through the crew. The idea of a predator that could feed on thoughts was as terrifying as it was alien. Asha exchanged a glance with Dmitri, who muttered under his breath, "We're in over our heads." "What do they look like?" Elliot pressed, his gaze unwavering. Liraeum paused, their light shifting to a deep violet. "They are like shadows encased in mirrors, their forms shifting and bending as if they do not belong in this reality. They move as One, a swarm that adapts to every threat. They have no scent, no voice, only the hum of destruction as they approach. "Why call us?" Asha asked, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. "Why humans of all species?" The elder turned toward her, their glowing orbs pulsing faintly. "Because you fight. You endure pain in ways we cannot. You possess a resilience born from struggle, from chaos. We do not." Elliot absorbed this quietly, his mind working through the implications. "If we're going to help, we need more information. What do they want? Why attack now?" Lyraem hesitated, their glow flickering unevenly. "We do not know their purpose." They appeared suddenly, emerging from the void. At first we thought they would pass us by, but they didn't. The conversation was interrupted by a sudden tremor. The platform beneath them vibrated, and a distant, low-pitched hum filled the air. The Thylla immediately shifted to a pale yellow hue. Fear. "They are near," Lyraem whispered, their tone like a dagger in the air. "They have come for us again." Elliot's instincts kicked in. "Asha, Dimitri, back to the ship. Get the scanners online and prepare for defensive maneuvers." As the humans hurried to the Aegis Dawn, the Thylla retreated into the mist, their forms fading like ghosts. The hum grew louder, more oppressive, as if the air itself was vibrating with anticipation. Elliot reached the bridge, just as the ship's sensors began to scream in alarm. On the view screen, the Kariv appeared, a swarm of shifting metallic forms that reflected the light around them in a dazzling but unnerving display. They moved as one, a singular entity composed of countless fragments, each piece twisting and distorting reality as it passed. Elliot clenched his jaw. "We've got company," he said grimly, his voice steady despite the chaos unfolding. The Aegis Dawn shuddered as the Kariv descended, and Elliot knew they had just entered a battle unlike any humanity had faced before. The Aegis Dawn shuddered under the stress of evasive maneuvers, the ship's engines groaning as it twisted away from the Kariv swarm. Elliot sat in his command chair, barking orders as the bridge was bathed in the flashing red of the alert. "Systems. Shields holding at 70%, but they're adapting to our patterns," Asha shouted from her console, her fingers racing over the controls. Her voice carried a mix of urgency and frustration, the kind born of a battle against something that refused to play by the rules. Elliot's jaw tightened. "Dimitri, divert more power to the forward shields. We need time to figure out their next move." "Already on it, but don't expect miracles." Dimitri's voice crackled over the comms from the engineering deck, the sound of tools clattering, and the hum of overtaxed systems formed the backdrop to his words. "This bucket of bolts wasn't built for psychic predators." As the Kariv swarm closed in, their forms shimmered like liquid glass, refracting the light in a chaotic display that was both mesmerizing and disorienting. Each individual fragment seemed to move independently, yet the swarm as a whole functioned with an eerie precision. They lashed out with tendrils of distorted reality, striking at the ship's shields and causing the structure to groan in protest. "Captain!" Lyraem's voice echoed faintly in Elliot's mind, a stark contrast to the chaos around him. The Thylla elder, having chosen to remain on the bridge despite the danger, emanated a pale silver light that pulsed weakly. "There is no defeating them with force. Their power lies in their unity, in the connection they share." Elliot frowned, his eyes narrowing as he watched the swarm's relentless attack on the view screen. "Then we need to find a way to break that connection." Lyraem hesitated, their light flickering with uncertainty. "There is something. An ancient guardian created by our ancestors long before we embraced peace, but it was deemed too dangerous, too unpredictable. It lies dormant in the abyssal vault beneath Nihilis's oceans." "Dangerous or not, it sounds like our best shot," Elliot said, standing abruptly. "Asha, plot a course to these coordinates. Dimitri, prepare the submersibles. We're going down there." The elder Thylla's glow shifted to a deep blue, signaling their apprehension. "Captain Vance, the abyssal vault has not been opened for millennia. We do not know what remains inside, or if it will even listen to us." Elliot met their gaze, his expression resolute. "We don't have the luxury of waiting. If we don't act, there won't be a planet left to save." Within the hour, the Aegis Dawn hovered above a swirling vortex in the ocean below. its currents illuminated by bioluminescent life forms that painted the dark water with shades of green and gold. The planet's beauty stood in sharp contrast to the destruction above, and yet Elliot couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to awaken something even more dangerous than the Kariv. The submersible, a reinforced pod outfitted for extreme depths, was prepped and ready. Elliot, Asher, and Dmitri climbed inside, their expressions a mix of determination and unease. The pod detached from the ship and began its descent, plunging into the inky blackness of Nilis's oceans. The lights of the submersible cast an eerie glow on the surrounding waters, revealing strange alien creatures that glided through the deep. Some resembled translucent eels with trailing fins that shimmered like silk. Others were vast, jellyfish-like entities whose bodies pulsed with electric patterns. "This is incredible," Asher murmured, her eyes glued to the viewport. Her awe was tempered by the tension in her voice, a reminder of the stakes at hand. Dmitri snorted softly. "Incredible, sure. Also the perfect place to die horribly, just saying." Elliot ignored the exchange, his focus on the readings displayed on the submersible's console. The abyssal vault came into view as the pod approached the ocean floor, a massive angular structure carved from a material that seemed to drink in the light. It was covered in strange geometric symbols that pulsed faintly, as though alive. The structure exuded an aura of power and age, its very presence a warning to those who dared to disturb it. As the submersible docked, the trio exited cautiously, their helmets filtering the pressurized atmosphere inside the vault's airlock. The interior was vast, its walls lined with crystalline conduits that pulsed with dim, rhythmic energy. At the center stood a towering figure, Nalareth, the ancient guardian of the Thelia. Its form was a blend of light and structure, humanoid, but abstract, with shifting geometries that defied logic. It moved with a grace that was almost hypnotic, its faceless head turning toward the humans as they approached. "Who dares awaken Nalareth?" the Guardian's voice boomed, reverberating through their minds rather than their ears. It carried a weight that made the air feel thicker, pressing down on them like a physical force. Elliot stepped forward, meeting the Guardian's gaze, or what passed for it. "I'm Captain Elliot Vance of the Aegis Dawn. We need your help to stop the Kariv. They're destroying this planet and its people." Nalareth's form shifted, its edges flickering like flames. "The Kariv are the great devourers. You seek to use me as a weapon against them?" "We don't have a choice," Asher interjected, her voice firm despite the tension in the air. "The Thelia can't fight them, and we're running out of time." Nalareth paused, its light dimming. "I was sealed for a reason. My activation requires a sacrifice, a willing mind to merge with my core. This choice cannot be undone." The air grew heavy with the weight of Nalareth's words. Dmitri looked to Elliot, his usual bravado replaced by unease. "You hearing this, Captain? This is way beyond what we signed up for." Elliot's gaze remained fixed on Nalareth. "We'll do what needs to be done," he said quietly, his tone carrying a finality that silenced further objections. But as the vault began to awaken, the crew could feel the cost of their decision looming over them, a shadow that would not leave them untouched. The air inside the abyssal vault vibrated with an otherworldly hum as Nalareth's crystalline conduits flared to life, their light pulsing in sync with the rhythmic cadence of the Guardian's voice. Elliot stood motionless, his team flanking. Him, their eyes fixed on the towering figure before them. The weight of the moment pressed down on them like a physical force. "Explain the sacrifice," Elliot demanded, his voice steady despite the rising tension. Nalareth's faceless form shifted, its geometric edges refracting light like shattered glass. "To awaken my full potential, a conscious mind must fuse with my core. This union will sustain my power and grant me the strength to combat the Kariv. But the mind offered will cease to exist as an individual. It will become one with me, irrevocably." Dmitri's eyes widened, and he took a step back, shaking his head. "This is insane. You're talking about erasing someone, turning them into whatever that is." Asha placed a hand on Elliot's arm, her expression a mix of concern and resolve. "Captain, There has to be another way. This isn't what we signed up for. There is no other way, Elliot replied, his voice low but resolute. We're out of time and the Kariv aren't going to stop unless we stop them. Nalareth turned its attention to Elliot, its voice softening as though it sensed the weight of his decision. The choice must be made willingly. I will not force it, but know this. Every moment you delay, the Kariv consume more of this world. The Thylia will not survive much longer. The hum of the vault deepened, its vibrations resonating in their bones. Above, the Kariv continued their assault on the surface, their shadowy forms wreaking havoc across Nihilus. The Aegis Dawn reported the destruction in bursts of static-laden transmissions. The planet was dying, and the crew knew it. Elliot stepped forward, his shoulders squared and his gaze unwavering. I'll do it, he said firmly. Elliot, no, Asha interjected, her voice trembling with emotion. There has to be another way, you can't— It's my responsibility, Elliot interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. He turned to face his team, his eyes locking with each of theirs in turn. You all trusted me to lead this mission, and I'm not about to back down now. If this is what it takes to save Nihilus and stop the Kariv, then so be it. Dmitri clenched his fists, his jaw tightening as he fought back the urge to argue. Asha looked away, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. The weight of Elliot's words hung heavy in the air, unspoken but undeniable. Nalareth extended an arm, a swirling vortex of light and energy forming at its center. Step into the core, it instructed. The process will be immediate. Your mind will merge with mine, and together we will eradicate the Kariv. Elliot nodded, his expression resolute. He turned to Asha and Dmitri one last time. Get back to the ship. When this is over, get everyone off this planet. Don't wait for me. We're not leaving without you, Dmitri said, his voice rough with defiance. You will, Elliot replied sharply, his gaze hardening. That's an order. The silence that followed was deafening. Asha reached out as if to stop him, but froze, her hand hovering in the air. She knew there was nothing she could say that would change his mind. Dmitri muttered a curse under his breath and turned away, unable to look at his captain. Elliot stepped into the vortex, the swirling energy wrapping around him like a cocoon. His body stiffened as Nalareth's light engulfed him, his form dissolving into the luminous currents. For a brief moment there was only silence, the vault holding its breath as the transformation took place. Then a blinding surge of energy erupted from Nalareth, the vault trembling under the release of power. The conduits blazed with a brilliance that pierced the darkness of the ocean, sending shockwaves rippling through the surrounding waters. Nalareth's voice echoed, now layered with a trace of Elliot's, resonating with a newfound intensity. The Kariv will face their end. Asha and Dmitri retreated to the submersible, their hearts heavy with the knowledge of what had just transpired. The vault rumbled as Nalareth, now fully awakened, began to ascend, its light cutting through the ocean like a beacon. Above the surface, the Kariv swarmed, their chaotic forms spreading across the skies of Nihilus. But as Nalareth emerged, its radiance overwhelmed the darkness. The Guardian unleashed waves of energy that fractured the Kariv's unity, scattering their forms into fragments that dissolved into nothingness. Aboard the Aegis Dawn, the crew watched in awe as Nalareth's power swept across the planet, restoring a fragile calm. Yet their victory was bittersweet. Elliot was gone, his sacrifice a heavy price for the salvation of Nihilus. As the last remnants of the Kariv faded, Nalareth hovered above the planet, its light a reminder of the cost of peace. Asha whispered softly, her voice barely audible. Over the hum of the ship's engines, he's still with us, somehow. Dmitri glanced at her, his expression grim. Maybe, but at what cost? The Aegis Dawn lingered in orbit, the crew unsure of what lay ahead. The battle was over, but the echoes of Elliot's sacrifice would follow them forever. Nalareth hovered above Nihilus, its radiant form a beacon of light against the remnants of the Kariv's shadowy assault. The once vibrant skies were now quiet, their eerie silence broken only by the faint hum of the Guardian's energy. On board the Aegis Dawn, the crew watched in awe, their faces a mixture of relief, grief, and lingering uncertainty. Status report, Asha ordered, her voice steadier than she felt. She stood at the comm station monitoring the planet-wide. Devastation. The screens showed fragmented readings, energy fields stabilizing, Kariv signatures fading, but the damage to Nihilus was severe. Crystalline cities lay in ruins, and much of the ocean's luminous life had dimmed, as if mourning what had been lost. Dmitri leaned against the console, his usual sarcasm replaced by quiet exhaustion. The Kariv are gone, at least for now. Nalareth really did a number on them, but this planet, it's on borrowed time. Asha's lips pressed into a thin line. The Thylia, she asked, turning toward the navigator. Survivors are regrouping, the officer replied. They're sending us a message now. The holographic display shimmered to life, and Lyrim's translucent form appeared, their glow a muted mix of green and silver. The elders' movements were slow, their emotional tones subdued, as if the weight of the recent events was too much to bear. Humans, Lyrim's voice resonated faintly, we owe you a debt that cannot be repaid. Without your intervention, without him, we would not exist. Asha swallowed hard, glancing briefly at Dmitri, who avoided her gaze. We just did what had to be done, she said quietly. But we lost him too. Lyrim's light dimmed further. Elliot Vance's spirit now lives within Nalareth. His sacrifice is woven into the essence of this planet's survival. His legacy will guide us. As the elder spoke, the Aegis, Dawn shook slightly, the vibrations sending a ripple of tension through the crew. The bridge lights flickered, and a deep, resonant voice filled the ship. It was Nalareth, or perhaps a part of Elliot, speaking through the Guardian. Humans of the Aegis Dawn, the voice boomed, both mechanical and deeply familiar. The Kariv are destroyed, but the threat they represent is not. Their origins remain unknown, their purpose unresolved. My presence here ensures Nihilus will remain protected, but the galaxy, it may not be so fortunate. Dmitri frowned, his hands gripping the edge of the console. You're saying there could be more of those things out there? Yes, Nalareth confirmed. The Kariv are not bound to one world or one purpose. They are a scourge of the void, an anomaly that feeds on weakness and despair. Elliot Vance understood this when he made his choice. The fight is not over. Asha stepped forward, her heart racing. What are you asking of us? Nalareth paused, its light flickering faintly. To remain vigilant, to prepare. Humanity's resilience is unique among the stars. It is why the Thylia called upon you, and it is why you must lead the charge if the Kariv return. Silence settled over the bridge, the weight of Nalareth's words pressing heavily on the crew. Asha looked around at her comrades, seeing the same mix of fear and determination mirrored in their faces. Finally, she turned back to the Guardian. We'll be ready, she said firmly, her voice steady despite the doubt lingering in her mind. Nalareth's form pulsed, its light growing brighter for a brief moment. Your path will not be easy, but it is necessary. I will remain here a guardian for Nihilus and a watchful eye against the Kariv. Elliot Vance lives on in this purpose. Carry his strength with you. With that, the connection faded and the Aegis Dawn was left in the stillness of space. The planet below glimmered faintly, its recovery just beginning, while the crew grappled with the enormity of what lay ahead. Captain's log, Asha said softly, activating the recorder. Her voice trembled only slightly as she began. The Kariv have been defeated, but the cost was immeasurable. Elliot Vance, our captain, gave everything to ensure the survival of Nihilus. His sacrifice reminds us of what humanity is capable of, not just resilience but hope, even in the face of overwhelming darkness. The galaxy may not be safe yet, but will be ready when the time comes. As the recording ended, the Aegis Dawn began its ascent, leaving Nihilus behind. The crew fell silent, each lost in their thoughts. In the distance, Nalareth remained a sentinel of light, a symbol of both sacrifice and the enduring strength of the human spirit. The ship disappeared into the vast expanse of space, its mission far from over.